Hello and welcome again to today's Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Tamer Nakhal. I'm currently a vascular and general surgery trainee. We'll wait for around minute or so for everyone to huddle around, and then we will start today's topic, which is about English language in researching. Again, this is a series of lectures. We've started almost 6 weeks ago. Currently, we are in lecture number 5. This lecture will entitle more about and talk about English language and researching, how to understand the paper. And the next lecture, which will be our last lecture before we kickstart our project, will be writing a paper and how to publish it so that everyone gets an idea. So by the end of this lectures or these series of lectures, you should have the basic concept of what is research, how to practically do it within the grip of your hands. Again, in around 10 seconds or so, we'll kickstart. And today's lecture will be about English language and researching. I thought I'll just pop in a picture I've taken of the north coast in Egypt of the Lazardos Sea, Mediterranean Sea. Just as a matter, it's raining in here, so thought just to give it a bit of warmth. And again, warm welcome to everyone. And so let's kickstart writing. So when you write, after you've done all your research, literature review, and literature study, now you want to start writing it, of course. And writing can be really challenging, especially for those whose mother language is not English, for example, Arabic or Pakistan or Urdu or any other language that is not your first language. English is not your first language, makes it a challenge. So the easiest way of putting it around is you must follow or have a structure in your mind in writing. You're not writing a novel, so you have to have steps in writing and ideas. You must have read the literature, everything that's been published about the topic you are researching. It would be quite worth knowing it back and forth, so everything about it. يعني تعرف كل إشي عن اللي أنت حتكتبه. You must also know your actual researching topic. It's your topic, it's your choice, it's your hypothesis, and you're testing it. So you have to explicitly write it and show that you understand it. Of course, follow the grammar, punctuation, and the structure. And proofread it. If you have a native speaker or somebody who has got a lot of publications, then you may give him the article just to proofread it. And of course, if you're the first author, then you will have a team. You will be part of a team, the second author, your senior author, and it would be worthwhile circulating it as a Word document and correcting it as you go. And then once the second author corrects it, goes to the senior author puts some suggestions, goes to the first author until it's finalized. So you start with a rough draft and you end up your article with a fully written, nicely ready for publication. And don't forget, use your own words. So when you, for example, quote or take something from a different research in your introduction or in your discussion, make sure that you rephrase it. Don't just copy and paste it, all right? Because that would be considered as plagiarism. Again, start with the title. So first things first is the title in any topic. Make it obvious to start up with. Yes, there are these nice fancy topics that they use, but to make it simple for you as a starter, just for example, here I've given an example. You can have a look. So this is an article that we will be analyzing together in terms of writing. And of course, journal clubs are made in order for you to read more articles, and as much as you read, the better, of course, you become in writing. So here you see they're stating the study type, where it was done, what they are comparing. So it's a multicentric randomized controlled trial. It's comparing surgery with conservative management of recurrent and ongoing diverticulitis, and they've called it a direct trial. So it's obvious, you know, from the topic, what is the research about. So then you have to start structuring your outline. Any research paper should have, of course, an introduction, and then you'd have a method. So in the introduction, this will tell the reader a bit about the topic and why it is important. That's how you would write it. Method, this will tell the reader how did you do the research itself. The results section, this will tell the reader what were the results itself and whether they were significant, and show the reader some graphs to make it nicer to understand. And of course, then you would come into a conclusion. This is a brief wrap up. You are telling the conclusion of the main points you found. So your outcomes, basically, yeah? So the primary outcome or the secondary outcome, whatever you found in the research. And of course, at the end, you put your references. Here, you would follow the journal style. Each journal that you will be publishing in has got its own style. So for example, I'm going to just pick up a journal from here. So this is a journal I've been publishing in. It's called Angiology. And if you look inside, they will have the articles and they have different kind of referencing to it. Anyway, not to bother you more. And of course, all these, you can make a small little abstract, مختصر مفيد, at the beginning of the article so that people get an idea, a glimpse of the whole outline of it, all right? So those are the particular kind of pillars, زي ما بحكوا عمود الأساس for structuring your research. So let's start by introduction. So we've picked this topic, this paper. Let's have a look at it, yeah? How they've done the introduction. So if you want to do an introduction about this topic, usually what I do is I structure questions, yeah? And I answer these questions. Once I answer these questions, I kind of delete the questions from my Word document, or if you have a pencil and a paper, and then you start kind of structuring your sentences and making them coherent. I think that's kind of an easy way to begin with. So I was like, what is diverticulitis? Why does it happen? What is the incidence, prevalence, and ways of diagnosing it? What are the methods of treatment for such cases? What is the aim of the article I'm writing? And of course, how will I sell the idea? Because each journal is looking at a very, nice article where a lot of authors will be citing it. Citing, which means they will be referencing their researches into yours, and that will increase the impact of the journal itself. So let's say those are my kind of 5 questions, and those I will kind of start writing my introduction around it. Let's see the paper itself. Yeah, I'm just going to move my picture here. So this is the paper itself that was published by the authors, and you can see that they are stating the incidence and the prevalence. And how do they present or represent? So the diverticulitis and diverticulosis, they state what it is, so they define it, and then they talk about how much does it cost the US, and then how many people, or how many percent, what's the percentage of people that have a recurrence, and what are the experiences and what are the complaints. So this is kind of the first questions that we've asked, isn't it? The incidence, the prevalence, they defined, put a definition, and how do they present or represent. Then they've moved into treatment options. If you see here the green underlined, I've underlined it for you. You can see that they can treat it with different, either conservatively, surgically, and then they jump into what traditionally was done, and then they say, why do we need to research it? And they said about the quality of life, and that's the most important factor. So again, as you see, they are answering the questions kind of what we thought they would answer, isn't it? And then factors of affecting the decisions. So there is some, if you read a bit more, you will see that they have elaborated more and explained about different factors. And then they spoke about the direct trial and what it is and what it's composed of. And then they jumped into the aim. And if you see here, it clearly states the aim of the present study was. And then they just simply say, what is the aim of their study? What is their primary outcome? And of course, the selling points, if you look at this paper, is the incidence and prevalence. How do they represent and present? And of course, because you're talking about money and you're trying to help the burden, the financial cost, it's attractive because anything that you will lessen the cost of is attractive, yeah? And of course, they've clearly stated the aim. So that's their kind of selling points in this journal. And of course, it's a randomized controlled trial. So again, as a rule of thumb, the more you read, the better you will write. So again, let's say I start writing my first sentence and I say diverticulosis is very common. It is estimated that it costs 2.2 billion dollars per year. Recurrence is common at around 20% overall. It's nicely written. It uses simple language, yeah, but it's not as nice as this one. And it's the same writing. So diverticulosis is a very common gastroenterological disease with an estimated annual burden on the healthcare system of 2.2 billion annually, where approximately 20% of patients develop recurrence. Again, so in here, we've just converted these simple sentences into more complex sentences using paraphrasing and using different connectors. Yeah. Let's say, okay, we want to make it even better. Again, diverticulosis, which is considered to be one of the most common GI diseases, costs the healthcare system around this. So here you've highlighted the cost, yeah? Moreover, approximately 1/5, instead of saying 20%, you can say 1/5 of the patient develop recurrence after initial episode. Again, all these are acceptable forms of writing, but I see that's the difference between, let's say, an IELTS of 6, 6.5, and a 7, and a 7.5. The more you read, the better you start writing. You start using your connectors, you start making your sentences complex yet easy to understand, yeah? And that will show how things evolve around you, and that's what makes an article easier to sell, if you know what I mean. Always use professional language. Never say, oh, like, for example, likewise, etc. Try to be very scientific. So most of the time you are just mentioning facts, actually, or findings. That's all about scientific writing. You're not writing a novel. Do not write, we found that the patients who get recurrence is 20%. Instead, for example, it was found, yeah? So don't refer to yourself or to the team. It's kind of more professional to say it was found that up to 20%, or you can say 1/5 of the patients had recurrent diverticulitis. Use connectors wisely. Yeah, so use and, or, but, however, yet, and as you see, I'm putting more connectors, and these connectors become more sophisticated. Yani, they look nicer. زي كلمة hence, thus, additionally. If you see in this paper, they use traditionally, yeah, previously, so far, not fat, sorry for the typo, due to, whereas, etc., etc. So try to learn as much as possible about connectors and how to accurately kind of describe them or put them in a sentence. Now that you've written the introduction, and I've given you a tip about the introduction, you're going to move into the method section. Method section is very straightforward. يعني هاي, this is your raw, and the raw of course is that the raw thing about it is that you are writing whatever you found. This is your method, this is what you've your study design. So in this section it's straightforward. You'll write your study design, prospective or retrospective, or it's a randomized controlled trial, over what period of time, who did you test, where was it done. Simple and easy sentences. Explain how did you do your literature search. So if you use your Prisma flow, as we've explained before, or you've used a different kind of literature review, or you randomly assign papers or books. What did you include? Exclude. So always write your inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. What was the sample size? And how did you calculate it? Whether you use a statistician, and whether it was powered, which means you found the number that will be significant towards your results. Again, this is just a hint about how to write the method section. Yeah, so it should be relatively straightforward when we start writing it. Then you move to the results section. In the results section, again, it's simple, straightforward. You mention what is your primary outcome. Yani, if you say your primary outcome is to compare between conservative and surgical management, that is your end point. And that is your selling point. However, sometimes, أحيانا, when you're doing some research, you find secondary outcomes. يعني بالمناسبة, you found that the rate of complications is higher, مثلا في A versus B. The morbidity was higher. The P-POSSUM score أو score معين لقيته أعلى في study A versus study B. Then you can say, oh, I found actually secondary outcomes as well, if applicable. Yeah. Mention your demographics. Always, always, always start with the simple things: age, So you find mean age or median age, depends on your data distribution. Always mention what gender they were, what's the distribution of your data. If you're looking at patients, of course, whether they were diabetic, hypertensive, so the basics, yeah, your simple clinical history taking, as they say. That's your demographics. Then you mention your results, the bulk of it. I always say it's the meat, اللحمة. This is your result, where you will show the p-value, the confidence interval, and what test you did use. Of course, as we said, for parametric tests, you'd use different tests. For parametric data and non-parametric variables, you would use other tests. Here you would need, of course, the help of a statistician to kind of help you in finding what is statistically significant or not, and calculating the p-value and confidence interval. And then, of course, you would write them up in your results section. Do not compare your results with others' papers yet. The results section, never start comparing. Just write your results raw data as you find it. You may put some graphs, you may include some tables just to make it, easier to read, nicer. And of course, you're highlighting your findings. Then you would move to the big bulk of it. And this is most like the toughest bit about writing a paper, is the discussion itself. Because here هي اللي بيسموها المناقشة أو المناقشة تاعت الماجستير تاعت الدكتوراه. It's pretty much simple, but at the same time can be very complicated, especially if you have a lot of debate around things. So this is really the tough bit. It needs writing and rewriting and proofreading and again and again and again, and editing. Here in this section, in the discussion, you will discuss your results, whatever you found. So you will mention your results again, but in a different way, and then compare it with the already known results, yeah, or something that's been published in the past. And here your literature search comes into play, because you will say, for example, in our study, or in this study, we found that most people benefited from conservative management. Around, let's say, 20% of those never developed complications, whereas in study A, it was found that they had higher complication rate, possibly attributed due to, for example, lack of surgical skills, or possibly due to a higher aging population. And you will find some differences in between where you can always write about. The reason being, you may find that actually there is an additional factor that wasn't considered in previous papers, something that you found new, newly found, or something that is significant. Otherwise, if you're, let's say, even if your results agree with other results, you would say, actually, in our paper, it agrees with the results of the other papers that have been published so far. And it shows that, for example, surgery is much significantly better than conservative treatment. مثلا يعني, okay? And then that's nothing to worry about. It's not about finding something always significant. It's sometimes actually the research itself tells you that actually this is insignificant and there is no difference. Yeah, so when you're publishing an article, don't be biased towards, oh, I have to find the result, I have to make it significant. Oh my God, it's not significant. And you start panicking and you think it's not publishable. Actually, non-significant papers are as publishable as significant results paper. Yes, so both results, whether it's significant or not significant, are publishable because you're proving the opposite. So you're accepting the null hypothesis. Yeah, remember that. And referencing here is very important. So whatever you write in the discussion, because you are taking simply the sentences again and you're paraphrasing it into your own language, you need to put in a reference. يعني مصدر هذا الكلام اللي أنت أو اللي أنت كتبه أو كاتبه. Yeah. So let's see here, for example, this is the paper we are I thought we would discuss. So they highlight first the results. So as I say, highlight the results, compare it with others. Do not forget to reference them. Discuss what are the results that you found in the literature. Start simple, move into more complex. Yeah. So let's see here an example. What did the study assess and how? So that's kind of how I think. The study assessed the cost effectiveness. So they, in the first paragraph, they almost say what is the study about, what they assessed, how did they assess it, and what they called it, yeah? And then they say about the follow-up, And here it comes the second. What did we know from the literature? And then you would find that actually they've looked at the different literature, and they did their literature search over the last 10 years or so. And then what were their findings versus others? And here you can see that they found that the quality of life at 1 year was different amongst different papers. And that actually, and after follow-up, the quality of life was assessed. And there were, in the literature, demonstrating that 6% from those will have some leakage. And they put 21, 22, and that is your reference, yeah? So simply putting, they did their literature search, and they found these results in other articles, and they now start comparing their results with the other literature, yeah? But when they paraphrase it, at the end of their paragraph, they write the number. So the articles that they've taken the information from, yeah? And then at the end, they write about their strength and their limitations. Each and every study has got its strength. So if it's a randomized controlled trial, its strength, it's random. There is a lack of bias, for example, and the exclusion criteria, well, blah, blah, blah. Here they wrote about the strengths of their article, and they said that it's randomized multi-centric design, so that gives it a high, kind of chance of non-bias. But then they also spoke towards their limitation, as you can see here. That the follow-up, for example, response rate was low, or they had some issues, and it's not a big deal. If you are honest, you write your strength and your limitation, your paper is within an accepted range, you would likely to be accepted in a journal. Of course, all this starts by sending the article to a journal. They start discussing it with you. You have reviewers. We will see an example next time in the next topic, and the last lecture, how a journal corresponds with you with examples. So again, at the end, you would move to your conclusion. So here, the conclusion always should be precise. You may start with, for example, to conclude, or the study shows, or to summarize the findings, or you may give as well a recommendation, or what did your study add to the literature or to clinician life. So for example, here it added a better, for example, perspective towards quality of life. Or let's say you found a new treatment or a novel treatment for diverticular disease. You would say that actually the new technique is highly significant, significantly better than the older techniques, and hence we urge all clinicians to start adapting it. And then here, once the paper is published, different, people start reading it. It goes into big journals, and when the people who develop the guidelines, they find a high evidence-based article, a randomized controlled trial that says, for example, surgery is better for diverticular disease, then the first-line treatment or the gold treatment would go in the guidelines. So let's say the national guidelines or the hospital guidelines into, for example, every recurrent diverticulitis would have surgery as first line as opposed to conservative. Whereas, so that's the purpose of why we're doing all this research, these studies, to try and tether whatever we find in our basic researching skills towards and link it towards our clinical bits. Of course, the researching can be either clinical or basics. And the basics would include particles and molecules and viruses and all these things, whereas clinical bits or clinical research would look into the practice, the quality of life of patients, the mortality, the morbidity, there is interventional treatments, etc. So that's how these, publishing and writing articles come into play. So this is kind of to conclude today's lecture. I wanted just to show you something more live, just because it's a lecture full of, words, etc. So as I said, I've chosen this article. You may also read it at your convenience in your own time. And treat it as your journal club of the week. Read it through, criticize it. As you know, you now can critically appraise. You understand what are the components of any article and the wording. So you know here, for example, this is a good title. You should know what is the impact factor of this journal, and this is a high evidence base because it's a randomized control trial. You know that, you know, the affiliations, where are they from? Let's say here from the Netherlands, these guys, and you can see that it's PubMed ID, and then you know that there is the abstract, and of course you can read through the abstract, and then you may download it, as we may know, through various links. Uh, I highly urge you, you know, after this lecture to download this article and just skim through, read the way they write. And I would encourage you to daily, at least, download one article, read it, because the more you read, the higher the chance you will develop this linguistic, you know, approach towards writing an article. I found this very useful, this scientific word usage in scientific writing document. I'm happy to email it to any one of you if you'd like, and it's available online. These people have done really nice, you know, they've put together what things to write, how to write it. So what's the difference between affect and effect, in here, you know, how to use different words, alternate, alternative, and then how to use the connectors. And if you skim through, you would see that they actually discuss some various, you know, different words that you may use whilst writing your article. And that would certainly help you whenever you're writing your first article, you know, especially if your English is not your first language. So for example, here you can sense the examples using multiple regression techniques, the animal experiment, eyewear, based only on this doubtful interference. And they kind of give you an idea of how to write an article, simply putting it. So you may know that you can download it, of course, the article through this website, and then you can, once you've downloaded, if you go through it, so we know that it starts with an abstract. Again, just read through the introduction. I always take a highlighter and try to print it and highlight everything, and just think, what was the question that they've asked when they were writing it? So that's kind of the reversing of writing, because when you write, as I said, start by putting questions, especially as a simple, you know, novice writer. That would help you structure it instead of, you know, having a no structure and chaos. Also, another way of using, you know, your writing, if you don't like writing on a piece of paper, then I urge you to use PowerPoint. Usually what I would do is have, let's say, the topic, the results. So I would put slides together, and these slides would have, you know, the abstract, the introduction, the method, and then the graphs, and the results and the discussion. And then I present it to myself or even to my friend, or even submit it to a conference as an abstract only, and it will be accepted as an oral or poster presentation. And then once you're accepted, let's say for an oral or a poster presentation, that gives you a chance to interact with other people about the discussion. And that even will enhance your discussion points, because you will see other people's perspective. And the more people discuss your article, the easier it becomes for you to write. So this is another way of doing it. Of course, then once you have done it, or let's say you've done it for your own sake, you've put it into PowerPoint presentations, and then you kind of discuss it or present it to yourself even, and ask yourself, what are the questions that they would ask? And then you start writing it up on a Word document. You can always share the documents between authors. Let's say you have 3 authors, you're the first and you have second and senior. You can share it via Google Documents, or you can share it via different, you know, interactive Microsoft new programs. I usually tend to use the Gmail, you know, the Drive, and I can see what the other people are typing, and the senior can see what we are both typing, and it's kind of interactive way of doing it, especially if you're distant. You're in, let's say I'm in the UK. Last time the 6-year medical student was in Grenada, so each one was in a different country, and the seniors were up north. So, and we were enhancing our experience via using, you know, these different programs. So I highly urge you to start slowly reading papers. This time there will be no homework. It's a slightly different. As I said, it's just to give you the idea of how to structure your first paper that you will be publishing. Next time, we will talk about writing the actual research. I'll show you a taste of how to write spontaneously with different people. We'll have somebody from the other, from another country writing, and we will be writing together, and we will show you how this is happening in real life, on Zoom. And then I'll show you how to publish an article and how to pick a journal, and then you'd see how the author's guidance would be, you would follow that. So as a regrab for today, you may start asking your questions in the chat. So you can type in your questions in here in Arabic or in English or in any other language if you can translate it to me. And then I will just skim through today. So as I said, today we spoke a little bit about writing and how to follow a structure. And then I spoke how you would write the title up, and then what structure, how to outline it, introduction, method, result, conclusion, and references. There are variations between different journals. You would follow the journal structure, and then start by your introduction. A simple way of putting it, you can always ask questions and answer them. And then, of course, you would find your selling point, and then you'd state your aim. Then you'd move into, and we said that, choosing the way you write enhances the experience of the reader and makes it nicer, and it may sell up in a nicer, higher impact journal. Always be professional and scientific in your language, and then move to your method. State clearly how did you do it, what's the study design, and what you've included and excluded. And then you would move into the results. In this section, you just talk about the primary outcome, your secondary outcomes, whatever you found and your study found, and state your results, whether they were significant or not. Do not yet compare your results, and put some graphs, of course, and some tables. And then you'd move into the bulk, which is the discussion. Again, this would need writing and rewriting, proofreading, and a lot of interaction between you and your seniors, and a lot of reading from various articles to structure the nice and the very end of it, from a draft to a finalized version. This can take up to weeks. And then I've showed you an example, a brief example of a paper. How did they do? And then, of course, you'd move to the conclusion and be precise. We've got a question in here from Abud. If you reference some info from a research, and that info is originally from even an earlier research, how would you reference it? As they did in here, you remember they did 21 to 25, which was mentioned in 4 articles, yeah? So you would mention in every article that it was mentioned, because the first, or you can go into the very first original article and just take it as a reference in there. However, here is a trick, because the older the reference, the more reviewers would look at the article as if it's old, يعني لما يشوفوا الدate تاعت الريفرنس من 1960 it will make it like old. That's why you need to have newer references عشان يبين إنه أنت your topic is hot and spot on, yeah? So if somebody, let's say, referenced it في 2019 واخذوا هذا من 1970 وفي article تاني في 1940, yeah? Then you would put all the 3 articles and you would say reference 1 to 3, yeah? يعني 1 to 3, 1-3, and then you put the first, second, and third. في برنامج كتير حلو, you can download it, EndNote, as you can see here. I have it on my computer. This will automatically download all the research that you've done on PubMed, all the citations, and you can insert the citation easily using the insert citation, and it will automatically start, moving your citation. If you say you move the paragraphs or the sentences. We will have more discussions about this EndNote in the next session. So that's why I highly urge you all to download it. A reference from the past 10 years is considered recent. Well, it depends on the study. If nothing has been happening in the last 10 years and you're the first one, let's say coronavirus was, let's say they've researched it in 1964 and then nothing happened since 1970, and then suddenly in 2020, there is corona pandemic, and your only reference would be from 1970 when there were some publications about it, yeah? So that would still consider as recent, isn't it? So it's relative. But yeah, it depends on how is the topic structure. If, let's say, a topic about diverticulitis, if you put something about 10 years ago, that would be an old reference, because there is a lot of things that have been happening over the last 5 to 10 years about that topic. And that is the way you would go easily and simply. Let's say on PubMed, if you go here and research it, let's say diverticulitis, yeah, and you pop and search, here you can see how the topic has evolved. So you'd know that we're in 2020 and this is 1911. So you know that minimal research was done, and then a lot of research started to come up from 2000s. And then you know that in the last 10 years, actually this topic has been a hot topic, and a lot of publications are around it. So it'd be odd if you actually start, you know, all your referencing from 1950 to 1960 and omitting all the new findings. Then this is an error in your referencing. Yeah, so that's a very good question, actually. Yeah, these things you would need to consider when you're researching, and that's where, you know, your research or literature search comes into play. I hope that you've enjoyed a new kind of, you know, window of experiencing a little bit of a taste of how to writing an article. Again, practice makes perfect, as they would say. The more you read, the better you write. At the same time, these lectures are meant just to give you an idea about researching as an ABC. And even on my YouTube channel, I've called it as an ABC, because there is the whole alphabet until you reach D. Yeah. So and that will take a lot of practice. And of course, hopefully, this will encourage you all to start writing and publishing and reading. One of the other things I would suggest is doing weekly journal clubs. For those who are interested, I would post in a poll later on to do a weekly or monthly journal club where we can discuss one paper or two papers to enhance the experience on how to criticize a paper. And that would be also over Zoom, given the fact that we are on distance learning at this stage. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's lecture. I will post it onto YouTube tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed and learned something new, and I wish you all the best of luck. My kindest regards to all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.